So guys, I've waited so long to say this, but it's that time again. It's Battlefield season, and we now know that the new game is going to be called Battlefield 2042. And, well, last week the devs were actually nice enough to invite me to a behind-the-scenes live stream event, and in that one we got a ton of new details that I want to talk about today. So guys, this is Billy Eat World again, and let's find out. Alright guys, how you going? Welcome to the video, and like I said, today we're going to take a look at everything we know so far about Battlefield 2042. And I've got to say, man, it is good to be talking about Battlefield again, because I mean, it's been probably 6 months since I've actually made a Battlefield 5 video. And the reason for that is obviously because, well, if you didn't already know, DICE decided to push the usual life cycle of 2 years out to 3 years for Battlefield 5 to presumably give them more time to work on this one. So that was a bit annoying, but maybe the wait was worth it, because according to the devs, Battlefield 2042 is going to be, quote, the next generation of Battlefield. So what does that even mean? Well, firstly, Battlefield 2042 is bringing us a completely new theme that we've never seen before. It's set in the near future, where, quote, the world is on the brink. Shortages of food, energy, and clean water have led to dozens of failed nations. Now, the USA and Russia are once again going head-to-head in this universe, but the twist is you'll get to play as a NOPAT, which is basically a specialist refugee soldier. And they actually fight on both sides, which I guess kind of makes sense, but it's also kind of even more confusing. So it'll be good to get some more clarification on exactly how this works later on down the line. Now, obviously, if you haven't already made the connection, I'd imagine there's a pretty good chance the devs went for this theme because of the reception to Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5. Because regardless of whether you like these games or not, I think we can all agree they played pretty loosely with the historical authenticity. And look, obviously that doesn't matter to everyone. BF1 was really successful, so obviously it doesn't matter to a lot of people, but for a decent chunk of the player base, it did. And I really think DICE struggled to find a balance with these games. Battlefield 1 tried to limit customization for the sake of the theme, and that didn't really work, so to counteract that, BF5 tried to bring it back to the point that it barely fit with the theme at all. So the beauty of the 2042 setting, if you haven't already realized, is firstly, there's no historical events to pay respect to, and that's really important for DICE because we know that they're big on telling new stories. And not just that, but it's close enough to the present day that a lot of the weapons and gear that we know and love from BF3 and BF4 will probably make a reappearance. And we'll talk about that in just a bit, but the other point that I want to make is that by playing as NOPAT soldiers, it means there's no obligation for the devs to make sure they look a certain way. So all of that controversy about cosmetics that plagued the reveal of Battlefield 5, well, that's not going to be an issue in this one. And that's going to give the devs a lot of freedom down the track to do whatever they want. Now, that might make you think that we're going to get a drastically different Battlefield game in this one. And look, from what I can see, it does look like there are going to be a few changes. But probably more importantly is the fact that it's obvious the devs are trying to anchor this game to, like I said, Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, not just with weapons and gear, but the gameplay itself. Firstly, as you can see in the trailer, Levolution is back. We can see a massive tornado ripping through the map, and there's also a rocket launching in one of the shots as well. And didn't you just think that a lot of the maps looked really familiar? I mean, they're not. The 7 launch maps are all new. I'll put them on screen right now. But I think I saw a Damavand in there, maybe a Siege of Shanghai as well, and a bunch of others. Most importantly, though, what we're going to see is a return to what the community likes to call only in Battlefield moments. And look, you guys know I'm a tactical shooter guy. That's never really been high on my priority list, but obviously it is for a lot of people. Battlefield is a sandbox shooter. In the trailer, we saw some of the usual things, like a quad bike killing a heli off a skyscraper, and a jet pilot nailing another plane with a rocket launcher. And look, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of other crazy stuff to do as well. So in a nutshell, I think it's safe to say Battlefield 2042 isn't going to take itself too seriously. And with that being said, this is where we get into the really interesting part of the video, which is the differences. And like I said, there's going to be a fair few of them. And first up is that for the first time, we're going to have up to 128 player cap servers, which honestly, I think is about as scary as it is exciting. This is going to be part of something the devs are calling All-Out Warfare, which is apparently one of the 3 distinct multiplayer experiences that's going to be available in this game. And in a nutshell, probably an easier way to put it is that this is the part of the game that features the modes that we already know and love, like Conquest and Breakthrough, and there's going to be more announced later on as well. Now, the second multiplayer experience is apparently going to be called Hazard Zone, and we don't really have a lot of info on that just yet, so I'll just read out what the devs have said themselves. According to them, it's, quote, an all-new, high-stakes, squad-based game type for the Battlefield franchise that is distinctly DICE, but very different from All-Out Warfare. And finally, as for the third multiplayer experience, well, we don't even know what that's called just yet, but we do know that it's not a battle royale and it's being developed by DICE LA. And it's, quote, a love letter to Battlefield fans and one that longtime players will feel right at home with. Now, I'm not sure what that means, but I guess we're going to find out pretty soon. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that I haven't mentioned anything about single player yet, and that's because apparently the devs aren't even going to bother with it this time around, which honestly isn't a huge deal in my opinion, because if you look at the percentage of playtime for most people, single player is only a small fraction, and some people don't even bother with it at all. But for new players, well, obviously it's a bit daunting to have to jump into multiplayer with veteran players. And so what the devs are doing this time around is allowing bots to fill up those empty slots, which honestly I think is a really good idea. And I wonder why it hasn't made it into a Battlefield game already. It's already standard in a bunch of other games, and it's a really great way to help new players improve their skills and stay on board and not give up because it's just too hard. Now, another thing I should mention is that as well as that, another big way DICE are shaking up the format in 2042 is by adding something that they were going to actually add in BF5, but they never actually got around to. In that game, they were supposed to add a system called class archetypes, which basically were subclasses that fit within the 4 regular classes and allowed for even more specific customization. In 2042, they're basically bringing the class archetype system back, and they're calling it specialists, and they're also mixing it with what we would know as the elites from Battlefield 5. So rather than picking the one generalized class, you'll actually pick a specialist that fits one of the 4 classes, and they'll have their own unique set of special abilities and weapon restrictions, as well as their own unique cosmetic look. Now, finally, just before we finish up, I really want to make an important point, which is that unlike the last 2 games, BF 2042 looks like it's going to be a return to the more is more philosophy. From what I can see, there's going to be a ton of vehicles, weapons, and special abilities in this theme that literally just couldn't exist in a historical setting. Probably the main ones you might have seen in the trailer though are the wingsuit, the drone dog, the remote turret, and a grappling hook as well. And of course, we're going to be seeing the return of helicopters and the introduction of VTOL aircraft as well, something that I know a lot of us have been missing for the last few years. But probably the most interesting thing I want to talk about though is that 2042 is going to introduce a plus system to handle attachments that can actually be used while you're in game. And if you don't know what that is, well, probably the most obvious example of that in another game is in the Crysis franchise. It's a system that allows you to attach or detach different attachments based on different engagements on the fly. Now, we don't really have a lot of information on this just yet. For example, I'd imagine there'll probably be a limit on what attachments you can carry. So we'll just have to wait and see how this system turns out. But either way, I think it's super interesting, and I'm sure it's going to shake up the meta a fair bit. But anyway, the last thing I want to talk about is probably the most important one. When are you going to be able to get your hands on Battlefield 2042? And well, we now officially know that's going to be October 22nd of 2021, and it's going to be available on PC as well as both current and old gen consoles. Now, on the topic of consoles, one thing I should mention is that apparently the old gen systems will be limited to a max of 64 player cap servers. And not just that, but the devs are going to be making an announcement later on down the track about crossplay. So we'll have to wait and see how that works in particular, especially when it comes to those old gen consoles. And also, and look, this isn't the most exciting topic to end on, but it is definitely worth mentioning that in terms of DLC for Battlefield 2042, DICE have decided to go down the route of a season and battle pass system. And look, we don't know too much about how this works just yet, but one thing the devs have stressed is that they don't want to split up the player base, so it's probably safe to assume that maps are going to still be free updates. Also, apparently there's going to be 4 seasons a year, with 4 battle passes and 4 new specialists. So you'd have to think that maybe the battle passes will make it easier to unlock those specialists or something. Once again, we don't know yet, we'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, guys, that's just about it for this video. And as always, just remember I can't possibly cover everything in just one video. So I'm going to do something a little bit different today. On screen now, you can see all the things the devs haven't talked about yet. So let's get a conversation going about those topics in the comments down below. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out all the links on screen and in the description if you want to check out any more of my videos. And also don't forget you can find my Twitter and Discord links down there as well if you want to keep in touch. And until next time, see you later and have a good one.